A bomb explosion in the City of London. It went off just over an hour ago. There are no reports of any injuries. Police say it's a small device under a car, but they've been warned there are more. The Royal Navy boards a French trawler after a series of attacks on Cornish fishermen in international waters. Good evening. A bomb has exploded in the City of London, and hundreds of police officers are responding to telephone warnings that there may be more bombs in central London. A police spokeswoman said the blast happened at 10 to 8 this evening. It was a small device planted underneath a car in Coleman Street near Guildhall and the Bank of England. The area has now been sealed off. There are no reports of injuries. The BBC received a telephone warning earlier this evening of bombs planted in Coleman Street and at other locations. Our Home Affairs correspondent Neil Bennett reports.
Just before 8 o'clock tonight, an explosion shook the Moorgate area of the City of London, immediately sending the emergency services and the police to converge on the area. According to the City of London force, a small explosive device went off under a car, but it's not yet known whether anyone has been hurt or how much damage has been caused.
Walked out and there was two cars in masses of flames, and one of them was actually upside down and the other one was the right way up, but in masses of flames.
If this turns out to be the work of the IRA, it'll be the second time this year that terrorists have attacked the City of London. The day after the general election, they murdered 3 people and caused millions of pounds worth of damage with a massive car bomb in the city. It's now 9 days since the last explosion in London, which wrecked a minicab after the owner had been told to drive around the West End. The IRA said they were responsible for that attack, the first time such a tactic had been used outside Northern Ireland. The week before that, the IRA said they left 2 small explosive devices in Victoria Street near the House of Commons and outside the Royal Festival Hall.
And we'll have more on that story as it comes in during the programme. The Royal Navy sent a boarding party onto a French trawler off the Scilly Isles this afternoon after Cornish fishermen complained of a series of attacks on their nets and their boats. The Fisheries Minister, David Curry, complained vigorously to his French counterpart, Charles Josselin, who promised a full inquiry. Monsieur Josselin described the incidents as unacceptable and promised that serious action would be taken against those involved. He said that France wanted to avoid a diplomatic incident. The incidents involving trawlers from Newlyn in Cornwall and from Concarneau in Brittany started 16 miles northwest of the Isles of Scilly. The first sign of trouble came at 5:50 yesterday evening. The British vessel St. Uni reported an incident involving French trawlers. At 6:30, the Britannia 4 said it too was being harassed. At 2 o'clock this morning, the fisheries protection vessel HMS Brecon reached the area. And this afternoon, crew from HMS Brecon boarded a French vessel after the St. Uni again complained of interference. The first of the 3 British fishing boats involved in yesterday's incident arrived back at their home port of Newlyn in Cornwall early this morning, having left their damaged nets behind. Their calls for help over the radio had brought a Royal Navy minehunter, HMS Brecon, to the waters north of the Scilly Isles. There were exchanges on the radio with French trawlers still in the area, but it was, said HMS Brecon's captain, merely an information-seeking exercise in which the Frenchmen gave their version of events. Back at Newlyn, the British fishermen gave theirs.
They blatantly ignored the position of our nets. Instead of towing their trawl around the nets, they were deliberately towing their trawl into the nets.
When we positioned our boat between the trawlers and our nets was when the trouble was, threatening to ram, throwing things, just waving things around. One boat literally had things thrown at him.
One of the French trawlers remained fishing in the area, permitted by EC regulations to fish for certain species between 6 and 10 miles off the English coast. But with the ship-to-shore radio, the Brecon's captain explained how he'd hoped to keep the peace between French and British fishermen.
It would be our intention to try and take the heat out of any situation as it arose, and we believe that the military presence alone is sufficient to achieve that. Actual intervention, we'd have to see how circumstances develop.
But then a British fishing boat returning to retrieve its damaged nets reported that the French trawler, the L'Arche, had again interfered, and the Brecon's captain was ordered by radio to send a boarding party. It wasn't easy, even on today's calm and sunlit sea. Watched by curious, smiling Frenchmen, 3 of the Brecon's crew climbed aboard, and one of them, a French naval officer serving temporarily with the Royal Navy, went on to the bridge to have a word with the trawler's captain. Back in the Frenchman's home port of Concarneau in Brittany, where one of the 4 trawlers involved in the incident had already tied up, the French fisherman's representative was non-committal about the affair.
We are not the state. The problem we have is to try to convince and to try to have dialogue, to have to convince them that the best way, if they want to have good fishing and to have a good relationship, is only to do the job in the right way.
HMS Brecon is to remain on patrol until further notice, and although a French government spokesman had said that the attacks were probably a deliberate act of sabotage and the perpetrators would be punished, there is no guarantee that the incident will not be repeated.
The government has strongly condemned the action of the French fishermen. In an emergency statement in the Commons, the Fisheries Minister David Curry said the incident was just the latest in a series of unprovoked attacks. He said the government would put sustained pressure on the French to punish the fishermen responsible.
Confrontation between British and French fishermen is nothing new. What is, though, is the level of violence and danger in this case. It brings to a head a series of clashes between the 2 fleets, clashes which have been escalating in the past 18 months as they compete in the busy general fishing waters off the Isles of Scilly. The incident prompted uproar in the Commons. The French fishermen condemned on all sides. Tough talking matched by the ministers concerned.
This is a violent and outrageous incident. The British government will sustain pressure on the French government to make sure that their vessels are brought to book.
Some backbenchers went further, demanding arrests and extradition. Others couldn't resist a general swipe at the French.
First we have British lorries blockaded in Calais by the French. Then we have British lamb burnt by the French. Now we have our fishing fleet attacked by the French. Is he aware that if he takes a very tough line on this, he will enjoy the support of my constituents, this House and the nation as a whole?
And from one Cornish MP, a warning that the government must keep up pressure till it produces results.
But my fear is that unless that pressure is kept up, the whole thing will slide, and then we'll have still more incidents and the thing will escalate again. We've got to nip this in the bud, and the people who can really stop it is the French government, coming down very heavy indeed.
In France, the affair has not provoked anything approaching the outcry here, although the Paris government has been quick to limit the potential damage, considering compensation for British fishermen and tough action against the culprits.
If the responsibility of the French boats is proven, I will ask the most firmness for the sanctions, because I consider that that events are completely inadmissible.
Fishermen on both sides of the channel had been hoping to negotiate specific areas for each fleet to operate in. Some fear the rogue fishermen may have undermined that totally, with only one result likely: more conflict.
The Prime Minister has issued a strong warning to his backbenchers to support the Maastricht Treaty. Shortly before leaving for the European Community Summit in Lisbon, Mr Major told Conservative MPs they'd been elected with a manifesto commitment to Maastricht. He also confirmed that Britain intends to back Jacques Delors for a 3rd term as President of the European Commission.
Ministers arrived at this morning's cabinet to complete what was in effect a formality: British support for the reappointment of Jacques Delors for a further 2 years as President of the European Commission. And while half-hearted attempts were made to sing Monsieur Delors' praises, the dominant impression that John Major wanted to convey as he left for the Commons was that there was no alternative to him.
There is, as I understand it, only likely to be one candidate. If that is Monsieur Delors, we shall support him.
The hat is there.
Since I take it that answer is as far as the Prime Minister's reserves of courage allow him to go to the answer yes, can I ask him to give Monsieur Delors the congratulations of the opposition?
But John Major's real target this afternoon were Tory waverers threatening to sink the Maastricht Bill. One suggested mischievously that he should follow the example of Ted Heath in the early 1970s and allow MPs a free vote when Europe's debated next week. John Major would have none of it. Instead, he issued a stern demand for party loyalty.
The House has now debated and voted on the Maastricht Agreement on 3 occasions. As I indicated a moment ago to my honourable friend, we contested the general election on that proposition, a general election upon which all my honourable friends were returned, and a manifesto to which they all subscribed. The Maastricht Treaty was negotiated in good faith by all member states, and I had no intention of breaking the word of the British government that was given on that occasion.
The Prime Minister then left the Commons for Lisbon, knowing that his firm declaration of support for Maastricht won't have gone unnoticed by his European partners. Tory doubters, surprised by the vehemence of John Major's call for support, are nevertheless divided about its significance. Some say it's further evidence that the government is out of touch with the extent of backbench unease. But others are saying it's proof positive that ministers are now genuinely worried.
European leaders are now arriving.